Ah, all right. Let me tell you about the time one city was running the entire global economy while Europe was still figuring out how to not starve. 762 AD, a caliph named Al-Mansur looks at a map and goes, "You know what? I'm going to build a city from scratch right here." And here just happened to be the most strategically perfect spot on the entire planet. Baghdad. Not inherited, not conquered, designed. Like someone sat down with a blueprint and said, "Let's engineer wealth." And here's the thing, it actually worked. But wait a minute. Before we get into how this city became the richest place on Earth, let's talk about what everyone else was doing at the same time. Europe? Oh, Europe was having a rough century. Fragmented kingdoms, local warlords, economies so small you could walk across them in an afternoon. Most people never traveled more than a few miles from where they were born. Trade happened, sure, but slowly, cautiously, and often violently. Meanwhile, Baghdad is sitting there connecting China to Africa to the Mediterranean to Central Asia all at once. Merchants showing up speaking different languages, carrying goods from thousands of miles away. Silk from China, spices from India, gold from Africa, furs from the north, glass from the Mediterranean. This wasn't occasional trade. This was continuous, a machine running nonstop. And Europe's over there like, "We have some nice wool." Here's where it gets interesting. Baghdad wasn't just lucky with geography. Plenty of cities sat on trade routes and stayed completely irrelevant. What made Baghdad different? It was built to absorb wealth, not resist it. Roads, canals, markets, administrative centers. These weren't afterthoughts. They were the point. The Abbasids didn't just rule territory. They managed systems. Tax collection? Centralized. Legal enforcement? Predictable. Commercial regulation? Clear enough to function, loose enough to innovate. And that predictability, that was the secret weapon, because predictability creates trust. And trust is the rarest commodity in economic history, more valuable than gold, more powerful than armies. Now, here's the part that'll mess with your head. You know how we treat sophisticated banking and credit systems as European inventions? Bills of exchange, letters of credit, moving money without moving metal. Yeah, Baghdad was doing that centuries earlier. Whoops. Carrying physical gold across deserts and oceans, dangerous, stupid, inefficient. So Baghdad merchants developed credit instruments. Deposit funds in one city, withdraw them in another. Trust networks backed by legal enforcement. Capital could move faster, farther, and safer than anywhere else on Earth. And this required something most places couldn't provide: courts that actually resolved commercial disputes, reputational systems that punished fraud, legal clarity that made contracts mean something. Baghdad provided all of it. The state didn't micromanage trade. It made trade possible. That distinction is everything. But here's what really set them apart. Knowledge as an economic asset. Not knowledge locked away in monasteries, not knowledge reserved for religious elites. Knowledge that was actively sought, funded, translated, and applied. The Abbasids sponsored a massive translation movement. Greek texts, Persian texts, Indian texts, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, engineering. All of it brought into Arabic. And this wasn't cultural charity. Oh, no, this was economic strategy. Better mathematics meant better accounting and navigation. Better astronomy meant more accurate trade timing. Better medicine meant healthier populations living longer, producing more. Knowledge increased output. Output increased wealth. Wealth funded more knowledge. The House of Wisdom? Not just some symbolic library. It was a research center. Scholars on salary. Translation incentivized, debate encouraged. They created something almost unheard of in pre-modern history, a professional intellectual class integrated into the economic system. While Europe was struggling to preserve fragments of classical knowledge, Baghdad was consolidating it, expanding it, and putting it to work. And the scale of this city, population estimates vary, but even the conservative ones place Baghdad among the largest cities on Earth at the time. Markets specialized, crafts diversified, public baths, hospitals, schools. This wasn't just wealth concentrated at the top, it was an ecosystem. Merchants needed scribes, scholars needed patrons, officials needed administrators, everyone feeding into everyone else. Specialization rewarded, complexity managed. Meanwhile, in Western Europe, cities were shrinking, literacy was narrowing, trade was contracting, power was localizing. Baghdad moved in the exact opposite direction. The contrast is almost embarrassing.
Now, you're probably wondering when this falls apart, because this is the financial historian, and spoiler alert, it always falls apart. And as usual, nobody learned anything. The first cracks didn't appear in markets or trade routes, they appeared in governance. See, the Abbasid Caliphate grew vast, too vast. Regional governors accumulated autonomy. Military leaders gained leverage over civilian institutions. Tax revenues that once flowed predictably into Baghdad started fragmenting across provinces. The system that enabled trust slowly lost its coordination. And here's the thing about wealth at scale. It depends on more than commerce. It depends on enforcement. Contracts only work if someone can enforce them. Credit only flows if defaults are predictable. Long-distance trade only functions if disputes get resolved without violence. As political authority fractured, those guarantees weakened. Not overnight, gradually. And gradual decay is always harder to recognize than sudden collapse. But wait, it gets worse. Internal power struggles accelerated everything. Court politics diverted resources, military spending rose, factionalism replaced coordination. None of this destroyed Baghdad's wealth outright, but it changed incentives. Short-term extraction began to replace long-term investment. Sound familiar? Of course it does. Stability, once the system's greatest asset, became harder and harder to sustain. And yet, Baghdad endured for centuries. Trade continued, knowledge persisted, institutions adapted. The city remained one of the most important economic and intellectual centers on Earth. That longevity, often overlooked. Decline is rarely a straight line. Systems with deep foundations don't disappear quickly. They absorb shocks, they reconfigure, they survive longer than outsiders expect. But eventually, the bill comes due. Mongol forces under Hulagu Khan reached Baghdad. The siege that followed was catastrophic. The city fell. Infrastructure destroyed. Libraries burned. Administrative continuity gone. But here's what most people miss. The Mongols didn't destroy a perfectly functioning system. They shattered one that had already lost its ability to protect itself. The internal structure was already weakened. The Mongols just finished the job. And what happened next is the dark mirror of Baghdad's rise. Trade networks unraveled. Credit systems collapsed. Specialized labor dispersed. Knowledge institutions lost patronage. Wealth didn't migrate cleanly to a new center, it fragmented. Just as connectivity created prosperity, disconnection destroyed it. Poof, gone. Now, here's where this stops being about medieval history and starts being about us. Baghdad's golden age challenges a deeply embedded Western assumption that wealth naturally follows conquest, or culture, or moral superiority. It doesn't. Wealth follows structure. It follows incentives that reward exchange over hoarding, trust over force, knowledge over extraction. When those incentives weaken, prosperity erodes, regardless of ideology, regardless of religion, regardless of identity. Modern economies operate on the exact same principles, just at higher speed and scale. Global trade hubs flourish not because they produce everything, but because they connect everything. Financial centers thrive not because they're virtuous, but because they reduce friction. Innovation clusters emerge where capital, talent, and information circulate freely. The pattern hasn't changed, only the technology has. There's a quiet irony here.
Many societies admire Baghdad's intellectual achievements while dismissing its economic ones as accidental or culturally specific. They weren't. The Abbasids built one of the first truly global economic systems because they understood something fundamental. Prosperity is engineered. It doesn't emerge from isolation. It emerges from openness, stability, institutional trust. And at the same time, Baghdad's decline offers a warning. No drama, just facts. No system is immune to overextension. No economy survives the loss of coordination indefinitely. When governance fragments, when incentives reward extraction over maintenance, when complexity outpaces management, even the richest city in the world becomes vulnerable. This isn't a moral story. It's a structural one. Baghdad didn't fall because it was flawed. It fell because it was human, built by people responding to incentives under pressure. The same forces that created its wealth eventually strained it. That doesn't diminish the achievement. It clarifies it. The Abbasid Golden Age reminds us that real wealth isn't measured only in gold or monuments. It's measured in how well a society moves information, capital, and trust across distance and difference. Baghdad did this better than any city of its time. For centuries, it proved that prosperity could be designed, scaled, and sustained,
as long as the system that supported it remained intact. History didn't forget Baghdad because it failed. It forgot it because later narratives narrowed the lens. But when we widen it again, the lesson is unmistakable. Wealth follows connection. Power follows coordination. And when those break, decline doesn't need an enemy. It happens on its own. But hey, we've definitely learned from this, right? Our global systems are totally stable. Our institutions are rock solid. Nobody's prioritizing short-term extraction over long-term investment. Opens news. Never mind. Baghdad showed exactly how to build lasting prosperity and exactly how to lose it. The blueprint's been sitting there for over 1,000 years. Most people will scroll past this and assume it's ancient history. The Abbasids probably thought their system would last forever too. If you'd rather see the patterns before they repeat, subscribe button's right there.